Welcome back in, ladies and gentlemen. Glad to have you guys here as we get ready for another episode. We are already 6 weeks into the season. That makes the halfway point when you hit that 6th week. We already have one team that is already bowl eligible, one of the only teams in the country to be bowl eligible so far, and Georgia still has not quite made it to that point. Got a couple of games till we can get to that point, trying to get to the 6 wins, which, it's been a crazy week of college football. That's all there is to it. A week that we thought was going to be a down week, a week that we thought, can't much really happen in this one. Not a lot to really look forward to. Really only one ranked matchup that we were looking at. It's like, all of a sudden that changed. All of a sudden that went from, I don't think there's going to be much to this week to what has happened. What is going on in college football? What in the world? What are we looking at right now? So we've got a lot to get to. We've got a lot to get to in this Georgia game that we're going to run through half by half, kind of how things have been going lately. It looks like first half of these games are really good. Second half of these games are really, really good offensively, defensively comparison at least. So that's kind of how we're going to break things down. Look a little bit at some of the injury stuff that's been going around, checking out our AP Top 25, and then obviously checking out all these other crazy games that have been going on around the country as well. So if you guys do not mind, make sure you guys follow along wherever you listen on podcasts. Also, you can go and subscribe to the YouTube channel whenever we get the video side of things back up and going. I will let you guys know. But if you're at least subscribed to it, you'll get it first. Make sure you guys hit that thumbs up if you are listening, at least on YouTube. And then if you guys want to support the show, we have that link as well. And also going over to speakpipe.com/dogtalk, you can also leave a voice message, whatever kind of message you want. Just talking about the game, any questions you guys have, anything like that. I'd be glad to take those on the show. So make sure you click that link in the description of the podcast as well. And again, you can support the show in that clicked link also there. Go to the link tree, and it has every possible link to go anywhere. Twitter, all of the things. Follow us there at DogTalk20. We'd appreciate it. All right, let's kind of get into things here. Let me go to our AP Top 25. Would probably be the first thing that I kind of want to look at. Don't have a lot of fuss about it, but I was a little bit curious about how things were going to look when I put out my AP Top 25 on Twitter, at least. After most of these games had gone final this weekend, I kind of had it Texas, Ohio State, Georgia. I still had Tennessee up there. This was before they had fallen to Arkansas, which we're going to get to. With a pending asterisk next to it. Obviously, they fall, so that changes. I basically had it as Texas, Ohio State, Georgia, Oregon, Penn State, and then that kind of rounded out. I think I had maybe one more team up there. Now that I think about it, I can't really remember who that team I had in that spot was. Maybe Miami? Maybe? Not sure. That's a good question. I think that might have been who I had there. But anyways, that's not the way the top 25 ended up looking like. And afterwards, I look at it and I go, okay. But then I also have questions about it. Texas is at the top. I think unanimously we can all agree with that. They had the bye week, and it's a great week to have the bye. Then Ohio State follows them. Again, I think that's fine to leave all of that well enough alone, just like it is. Obviously, those two teams move up one spot with Alabama previously being number 1. Oregon jumps over Georgia, jumps up 3 spots to number 3. This is the one I don't really get. That's Penn State jumping 3 spots up to number 4 over Georgia. Georgia stays steady at 5. And here's where I come from on this. Again, we're halfway through the season, so it doesn't really matter. But anytime there's a ranking, the way that I look at it is this. Is that team truly better than the team they're ahead of? Regardless of the 5-0, 4-0, 6-0, 4-1, whatever there is up there on the board. Is the team that you have put ahead of somebody else, are they the better team? And if they're not, they don't deserve to be up there. Now, some of these teams that just lost in the Tennessee and Alabama, that's a little bit harder to be said. Again, Alabama obviously beat Georgia. Now they're below them. So if I go by my own mantra there, essentially, yes, Alabama should be ahead of Georgia, but that's not the way that it works in this case because of that loss. Because of the loss that Alabama just took after Georgia lost to them last week, that's why I do understand why Georgia doesn't move any and stays at that number 5 spot, because retrospectively that does affect Georgia's ranking based on the fact that the team that just beat them just got beat by a much more inferior team. Not putting any kind of deadening on what happened with Vanderbilt, because I'm going to give them their credit here in just a little while once we get to that point. But that's the only thing I'm looking at here is Penn State a better football team than Georgia? I don't think so. Now, they would have to play a game against each other to truly prove that. Is Oregon better? Potentially. Is Ohio State and Texas right now? They've kind of separated themselves from the rest of the pack. And Georgia has some catching up to do to get to that point. Will they? We're going to find out in a couple of weeks when Georgia and Texas face off. But this is what your top 5 looks like. It's Texas, Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, Georgia. Rounding out to the 10 spot, we got Miami at 6, Alabama 7, Tennessee 8, Ole Miss 9, Clemson at 10. Then you go to Iowa State, Notre Dame, LSU, BYU, Texas A&M through 15. A&M took a huge jump up there, 10 spots from 25th to 15th of the huge win over Missouri, who fell 12 spots down to 21. But rounding out 16 is Utah, Boise State at 17, Kansas State 18, Indiana 18. They're actually tied for 18th there. Okay. There's 3-way tie for 18th. I did not realize this till just now based on the points they've given. That's Kansas State, Indiana, and Oklahoma. All technically tied at 18th, and Indiana being the first team bowl eligible, 6-0 on the season. Then you get Missouri 21st, Pitt at 22nd, Illinois at 23rd, Michigan falling down to 24th after suffering their second loss, and SMU there at 25. Some of the others getting votes is USC, Nebraska, Navy, Army, both undefeated for the first time since like 1925, long time. Vandy getting 26 votes, Arkansas getting 17 votes. Some pretty fun stuff to see there, at least in the top 25. So that's what I have, at least from the top 25 voting in there. Again, take what you will with it. We got a lot of football to play. You definitely don't want to find yourself outside of this top 10 right now with a lot of the schedule left. You do want to have some breathing room. So I don't want to pretend like halfway through the season the rankings don't matter at all, because do they and don't they? I've always said they don't really matter until the end, and that's very true. But right now is where you have to be a little bit more careful when you've lost one football game, because you don't want to be ranked 10th or lower and then lose another game, because it makes it a lot more tougher to get in that top 12 spot, especially if you're losing a couple of games and not playing for a conference championship. So that's kind of going to matter coming forward. But again, I kind of look at it and I go, is this team that is ahead of us, are they better? And some of them I see maybe, and then some of them I see that maybe not. But again, all entitled to your own opinions, and that's mine coming into it. All right, let's get into this Auburn recap. Auburn recap, and we're going to look at it kind of half by half again. Like I said, Georgia does score in the first quarter of this game, which feels like we haven't all season. An actual touchdown, I should say. And also in the second, making it 14-3 before we get to the half. The half stats look like this. Georgia had 193 total yards. 124 of those came through the air, 69 on the ground. To Auburn's 147, 80 of which come through the air, and 67 on the ground. Georgia did have 11 first downs compared to Auburn's 7. A little bit better on third downs in this one, at least through the first half. 4 for 7 to Auburn's 3 for 7. Didn't have to go for it on fourth down. Did run a few more plays than Auburn. A little bit better on the average yards per play, but not through the air. They averaged a little bit better there. We slightly edged them in the average rushing category, at least yardage-wise. Going into it, we were 2 for 2 in the red zone, and we possessed the ball slightly less than they did. About 16 seconds was really the only difference in that. We both had 2 sacks in the first half. Georgia also had 3 tackles for loss in there as well. Carson Beck, 124, 1 touchdown, 14 for 16 through the air. Looked really good in that side of it. ETN goes 9 carries, 54 yards, and a touchdown on the ground. And then ETN also led the charge in receiving in this as well, 28 yards on 5 catches. Dominique Lovett had 25 yards on 3 catches, 1 touchdown in there, 24 yards for Colby Young, and 33 yards for Lawson Lucky as well. It was just another one of those, the start of this game, it just, I don't know what it is. I say I don't know what it is. I have a theory. I have a slight theory. And, last week, obviously, playing against Alabama, a lot of this was, it's not executing. It's not making the plays even when the plays are there. And maybe there was some of that in there. I haven't looked as deeply into it this week so far to kind of see that. But what I've kind of noticed, and this is just a note that I kind of made on this, we're really lacking the guy or the guys / leaders so far this season that have been able to step up and be that difference maker. And you've probably heard a million talking heads that have said this exact thing, that what is happening right now is you don't have a Brock Bowers. You don't have a Ladd McConkey. We know that, but we can't harp on the fact that we don't have those guys anymore. You have to move forward. Somebody has to step up in that role. And I'm not saying they have to be the next Brock Bowers, because that's hard to come by, and I don't know that you'll ever have that again. I'm not saying that you have to be the next Ladd McConkey either, because, again, tough dude. All of these guys, Hunter and I even talked about this at work one day, was both of these guys, they're showing it by what they're doing in the NFL as rookies this season. They were playing for the University of Georgia last year, and as rookies in the NFL, they're proving to you and showing just how good they are by not only starting and playing in these games, but being a difference maker and affecting the game as well. Ladd McConkey already has multiple touchdowns, I believe, on the season in the NFL already. And if that doesn't tell you enough right there, I mean, my goodness, those are huge guys, and I know that that's hard to come by, but somebody on this team has to step up, whether it's in that leadership role that's holding somebody accountable on a defense, kind of like Nakobe Dean would do, having these guys that are back there that are being the voice on defense, but then offensively also having these guys who are stepping up, making the plays. Now, credit right here, looking at this receiving category, I do want to point this out. Trevor Etienne, that's something we've talked about here over the last little while, is we need that guy that's able to catch the ball out of the backfield. Not only carry it and give you some explosivity and kind of open things up for you, but also be able to catch it out of the backfield and make a difference, like a McKenzie or a Kendall Milton did in years past. Isaiah, my goodness, now I'm blanking on McKenzie. I had him in my head and I blanked on him. But having these guys that can catch the ball out of the backfield, James Cook, another one of those guys, having these guys that can not only run the ball but catch the ball and make plays out of the backfield made a difference. So it was good to see ETN kind of stepping up in that way and trying to do that. But on the wideout side, we've got to have more of it. Lawson Lucky's trying his best to stand up there in more of that tight end position, but we're not really having that wideout that just stands up. I was hoping this would be the year that Arian Smith would really blow up. Again, he can be as fast as lightning, but if he's not catching the ball and making the plays, then we're not. He's just not the guy. Dylan Bell has seemed to be the guy who, no pun intended, but we ring the bell when we go to him more and more often because he is that sure guy who's going to catch it more often. Dominic Lovett kind of has proven that a little bit as well. We see that even in the Colby Young, who's starting to kind of rise in the ranks for the Georgia wide receivers as well. Maybe these are the guys that are trying to make that step, but right now it just doesn't seem like we have that standout playmaker who is just making the difference for this offense. And that, to me, seems like it's kind of the difference in it right now, where things just seem lackluster. And I don't want to say that it's just where we're having this first half where, we're trying to fill a team out. We're trying to see, what is this team doing? What is this team about? They're giving us different looks here and there, but we're just not coming out explosively. We're coming out very, very slow and just not making a lot happen easily and quickly like you would think a Georgia team would. And some of that is going to be recency bias of having some of these teams who are able to just blow it up. And you got to give a lot of credit. I know this is looking back, but to Stetson Bennett and some of the things he was able to do with his legs made a big difference. It made it exciting at times. Sometimes made you terrified because you didn't know what was going to happen. But nonetheless, it still was. He was able to make things happen with his legs when something couldn't happen through the air. And I'm not saying that Beck's not doing that. I think he's doing everything that he can. He's obviously not the same exact guy that Stetson is. Stetson is much more of a run guy who has more of that ability to do it more than Carson does. But Carson also should have the arm to do it. That's where I'm going to get to this next part of this, which is Carson's arm. I don't know that Carson's injured, and I'm not trying to say that he is. But there have been a few throws this year that seem a lot. It just doesn't seem like Carson Beck's game. It doesn't seem like the game that we've seen over the last year, especially last year with some of the throws that he would have. He's got a lot of balls that are falling short, a lot of balls that are coming behind guys, and just not as accurate as he was last year. And I don't know what that is. I'm not going to say it's him dating anybody. I'm not going to pull that into it and say that's what the issue is in this. You get a girlfriend and all of a sudden you can't play football. Not saying that at all. But what I am saying is something's up. I don't know what it is. But, again, maybe it's just we need that stand-up guy who can really be the difference maker for this team. But right now, that's part of it, too, is Carson's a little bit off of his game, where normally he's able to kind of open things up and go and do all of these things that make him successful, make him the quarterback we expected him to be, make him the quarterback that everybody thought could potentially be a Heisman candidate and an early draft round in the first round pick as well. So these are some things that definitely have to get cleaned up, and we have to look and see. And it's also kind of hard to say that when you look down and you go, okay, he went 14 for 16, that's great. But he only threw 124 yards in that first half, 1 touchdown. Still, not bad at all. Again, 88% on the completion percentage, so not gonna really fuss at him too much there, because it seems like you're doing a great job. But again, we're scoring 14 points in the first half of this game. Not a lot of points. Not a lot of points are being shown on the board for what we feel like Georgia should be showing. Then let's kind of fast forward and look at the second half of this game. Second half of this game, we do score a touchdown. We also give up a touchdown, and then we score a touchdown and a field goal in the fourth quarter, giving up a field goal as well to finish this one out. Obviously, 31-13. Carson Beck's stat line, again, did not look bad in this one. 23 for 29, 79% completion percentage there. 240 yards on the day, 2 touchdowns. Again, not bad. It didn't look bad. Gets sacked a few times in this game, or a couple of times, I should say, at least. But for the most part, has a fairly clean pocket in the second half. That was one of the things I noticed. There was one play in particular where I noticed Auburn, it might have been the first half, where they rushed 3 guys and still got home. That's something we've got to clean up on the offensive line for sure. But in that second half, it looked like he had a lot more time to be able to do what he wanted with the ball, and he was able to spread it out pretty well in this one too. Again, ETN, 36 yards on 6 touches. Dominique Lovett, 38 yards on 4 touches with a touchdown. Dylan Bell, 18 yards, 4 touches, and a touchdown. Then you get Colby Young, 51 yards. London Humphreys, 40 yards. Austin Lucky had the 33. Cash Jones got 17 later. Arian Smith had 1 touch on the entire night for 4 yards, and then Branson Robinson also gets a touch for 3 yards. So out of those, you get 9 receivers touching the ball for 23 of these passes that were completed to him. ETN, obviously, he also led the charge on the ground, 88 yards on 16 touches, 2 touchdowns, averaging 5.5 yards an attempt, and then obviously his long was that 23-yarder. Nate Frazier also got back in, something that we were kind of wondering why we haven't seen more of Nate since the start of the season. And I know that Kirby has said, hey, he's got to work on his pass pro. If he's not able to protect back there in the pocket, and we have him on the field, and we're in a pass position where we got to pass the ball, but he can't protect the quarterback in this, and he's not able to block the way that we need him to, he's not as effective as putting somebody else in there. I understand that as well. But right now, as far as truly running the ball, it really looks like the 1-2 punch is Trevor Etienne as well as Nate Frazier. I really think those are the 2 guys that should be swapping in and out for 1 and 2 positions. Not to say anything bad about Branson Robinson, but Branson, to me, has proven, hey, I am the hand me the ball, and I'm a 2 yards and a cloud of dust guy. That's what we're going to do. I'm going to run right through the middle, and I'm going to bust some chops while we do it, and I'm going to get you those 2 yards you need. But we're not going a lot further than that. So that's what I see in him. Is that critical? Probably so. That's just what I see on the field right now. Branson did carry it 8 times for 14 yards, averaged 1.8 yards when he was there. Frazier in his 7 touches as well, just 1 less. He had the 38 yards, averaging 5.4, almost what ETN was also averaging in this one. So that's a couple of things to look at. But Dylan Bell did have the 1 end around for 18 yards as well. So that's what I see in it, though. Total yardage in the end, Georgia, 381 yards. Auburn, 337 yards. We had 240 through the air, 141 on the ground. They had 200 through the air, 137 on the ground. A lot of penalties in this one. That's another thing I'd like to see get cleaned up a little bit more. 7 for 85 yards. Just a lot of penalties. We seem a little bit less disciplined this season than we have in the past couple of years, so I'd like to see that get cleaned up a little bit more. 2, better on third downs. We did go 50% in this one, 7 for 14, and we are killing it. I don't know what the percentage is. I should look this one up, maybe even ask Eric over there at the Bulldog Report. Hey, what are we statistically, and I could probably click a few buttons and find it, but fourth downs this season, we got to be pretty highly, we got to have a pretty high percentage, I would think, in this. We are 2 for 2 on the night in this one. We ran quite a few more plays than they did in this one. We averaged about the same, though, 5.8 yard play. They averaged a little bit better through the air and on the ground, actually, but we still ended up averaging about the same. Red zone, we were 4 for 4 on the day. We had the ball only a few minutes more than they did. One of the biggest things in this game was there were no turnovers for either team. They didn't make a mistake, but we did not make a mistake either. which was a big deal. So Georgia, 31-13. It was just kind of one of those. I don't really know. It was one of those games you never felt like you were going to lose, but you never felt like we really pulled away. And again, it ends 31-13, but it never really felt like Georgia just absolutely ran away with this game. Great game. Glad to see Georgia get the win, and don't really want to complain about it there. One other thing, not to complain about, but just to bring up that I heard, obviously Kirby talking after the game about the crowd and how it didn't really seem like the crowd was into it as much as he would like for them to be and making a difference in this game. And you could tell later in the game, obviously most of the crowd had left. I know it's homecoming, so obviously your students are kind of leaving, getting ready for whatever festivities there are for homecoming. In this one, I can't say I have the answer to that one because I'm not a Georgia alum. But nonetheless, he does bring that out. And then in his presser today, he also brings that question got brought up a couple of times to him, and he ends it saying, "Hey, I don't know why we're trying to make this like a you guys versus the crowd, guys. That's not what we're doing. We're trying to have a one team here between the fan base as well as the players, and we want to be able to come together and have great fans and a great atmosphere every time we show up for the game." And I also have seen the side of it where the fans are saying, "Yeah, well, you want that? Hey, maybe give us something worth cheering about on the field." That's a tough look either side of it. And I don't have an opinion either which way. I'm not sitting at every football game that there is out there, but it's definitely a question that was very interesting when I saw it get brought up. Just because, in years past, Kirby has put the call out there, "Hey, I want the fans to be here early, loud," and the fans have answered that call. And this year, all of a sudden, seems like, hey, he's not feeling that call as being answered as much in this season. Maybe this is kind of a wake up to get the crowd back into things as things move forward. I know some of this I feel like could be hindered by a little bit of the schedule here the last couple of years. The home schedule has not necessarily been that great. We're not getting those night games that you generally like to have to really create a raucous atmosphere. But hey, I was at the 12 o'clock kick against Arkansas a few years ago, and that was the loudest football game I've ever been a part of. And a lot of people have said that was the loudest Sanford Stadium has been over the last few years too. So maybe we can get back to that and make everybody happy between the fans as well as Kirby on that. But nonetheless, hey, Georgia gets the win in this one, 31-13. That's all we care about at this point. Moving to a 4-1 record, again, staying at that number 5 position in the AP poll is what it is. Just glad for Georgia to get a win and move on to what we'll move on to in Mississippi State later on this week that we'll kind of get to when the time comes. Now, let's look at a few of these games around the country because, again, it was a huge upset weekend in the top 25 this week. Again, there was really only one big matchup, and that was Missouri and Texas A&M that we were looking at coming into the week, where it was like, all right, well, here's your ranked on ranked matchup. That should be about all we really have to watch because Alabama's playing Vanderbilt, not much to look at there. Arkansas, Tennessee, Tennessee's offense is elite. They'll roll through that. Miami and Cal, game days at Cal. Cal's giving teams fits, but Miami, they look to bounce back after Virginia Tech, and then you get USC and Minnesota. It's USC. Their offense will be fine. Then you get the national championship rematch in Washington, Michigan. All of which of these games, with exception to that Miami-Cal game, they all end in that upset. Every single one of them. All of them. And I want to kind of start with that the rematch of the Michigan and Washington game, and I think this was really where we got to that point where it was like, all right, we've kind of known all season Michigan is not what they were last year. And they kind of continue to prove that this year. Week in and week out, they just look worse and worse. That's all there is to it. Can't really figure things out. Quarterback. Defense isn't as elite as it was last year. And the craziest thing to me is they can't run the ball the way that they could in the past. Maybe it's because that offensive line isn't as good as it was either. Everybody seems to leave when Harbaugh left, so that's kind of what you get from Michigan. But they fall again 27-17 to Washington in this one. And then you get Minnesota and USC also facing off in this one. See if I can get it to pull up on my screen. Doggone, I can't find it anywhere. Oh, yeah, here we go. Minnesota upsetting USC 24-17 in this one as well. Again, I think it all just boils back down to USC having to have that defense just enough to be able to stop it. Does seem like it's a little better this year, but still not quite to that caliber. Losing in this one again, 24-17. Miami-Cal again. Miami was down in this football game. Whether you think they won or lost last week, this week was crazy. They were down 25 points and came back and ended up winning this one 39-38 on the road at Cal. For whatever reason, again, they're a long ways from home. Maybe that made a difference in this. They're way, way, way away from home, having to travel completely across the country in what is an ACC matchup, which is still nuts to me. But nonetheless, they pulled it out in the end, and that's the thing I've said, even regardless of what Georgia did in that Alabama game, elite teams, they find ways to win. Championship caliber teams, you find ways to win, even in these games that you probably shouldn't be in like this. Even in the game that you're down 28-0, you find a way to win. And if you can't win, you might as well get as close as you can. And they came as close as they could to not winning this game, but they do end up pulling it out in the end, which Georgia could not do last week against Alabama. 39-38, Miami over Cal. Then Arkansas and Tennessee. This was a game that I was hoping Arkansas could pull off. Arkansas truly should be like a 5-1 football team, or 5-0, 6-0 now, whatever. Arkansas is not a bad football team. They have a good defense. They've got some questions offensively. They end up winning this game again 19-14 over number 4 Tennessee at home and upsetting Tennessee, kind of not necessarily ruining their chances moving forward because, again, I think they're ranked 8th. So they're not falling out anything far. But Arkansas is a good football team. I'm not saying they're great. I'm not saying they're top world beaters or anything, but they definitely, to me, should be like a 5-1 team. And they continue to win. They continue to prove every week, hey, we're not out of this. We might not make it all the way, but we're going to chomp at you and do everything we can to try to take you down regardless. And the quarterback for them, to me, also another one of the elite guys too there. Trying to figure things out offensively, missing a couple of key pieces there, but defensively, they're a good football team. And I can't remember if I said it coming into this game, but Tennessee hadn't ran up against a true defense. Yeah, their offense was high-powered in the first 3 games that they played, but they never played anybody. They didn't play a defense that's truly going to play you upright the way that Arkansas did in this game, and I was glad to finally see them have to face a team that can play defense. And then all of a sudden you see Nico Amialava, I wish I could say his name right, but he's not an alien. He's not this freak of nature that can just run over anybody and everybody, and Arkansas proved that in this game. I mean, he runs out of bounds to end the game, if that tells you anything, but real Joe Milton-esque to me. But anyways, Arkansas does pull that one out 19-14. And then we get to probably the biggest one of the weekend. Again, Georgia can't find a way to beat Alabama last week, but I'll tell you what, Vanderbilt can. And at this point, I think Vanderbilt should probably be ranked 3rd in the country, a little bit better than Georgia. Georgia couldn't do it, but Vanderbilt could. Did it at home in big fashion. And this wasn't a fluke game. This wasn't a game that Vanderbilt just happened to squeak by and score 28 points to Alabama's 27. No. Vanderbilt gave Alabama every single thing they possibly could handle in this game. And the thing is, they never gave up. That was the biggest difference. From the jump of this football game, Vanderbilt never gave up. They never stopped playing football. Georgia, when they played Alabama, and I've got to go back to this because we're Georgia Football Podcast, from the get-go of that game, Georgia was not in it. It took Georgia until late into the second quarter to make adjustments and start to find themselves getting into the game. And then obviously late into the football game, they've got a lead. Again, very short-lived, but they get a lead in that football game. And it just makes you wonder, man, had Georgia played a full football game, had Georgia came into it ready to fight like Vanderbilt did in the very first quarter from the jump, what kind of a football game does that turn out to be? What kind of a game does it turn out to be? Now, I'm like you guys. The entire time, I knew Alabama was going to come back and win this game. Matter of fact, I was texting with some friends, and I said, this one's probably – I'm glad that Vandy made a good run of it here for the first half because it's probably going to end 42-17. But it's a good look here at the very beginning, or 42-21, whatever it was at the time. I was like, but it was a good run for Vandy. And they never did. They never quit, never gave up, fought the entire way through. Credit out to Diego Pavia for absolutely playing lights out throughout this entire game. Bringing out his inner Johnny Manziel, I've heard people say. But I love the fight, determination, grit of this team. I know when we were talking about this game coming in, I caught it, Jode, but not for the whole game. I said, watch out now, Vandy might make this a game in the first quarter. Well, again, They made it a game the entire time. I don't know that Alabama ever led that football game at all. I remember watching it. Vandy gets a 7-0 lead. Okay, not the end of the world. It seems like a couple of years ago when Alabama went to play them, Vandy played them tight in the first quarter, first half of that game too, before Alabama did what Alabama does and pulls away. But they went up 14-0 on the pick six, and I was like, that's interesting. And then it was 21-0, or it might have been 21-0 after the pick six. But regardless, I was like, wait a minute now. This is a team who was beating Georgia 28-0 in Tuscaloosa a week ago, and now they're in Nashville, and it's 21-0 the other way around. Vanderbilt's routing this team early, and they're it's not a fluke. They are playing lights out football in this game, and again, they just never quit it. They never stopped. Credit out to Vandy in this game. What a football game to never give up and just to keep rolling. Now, on the Alabama side of this, was it Malachi Moore? Is that what it is? Number 13? Can't remember. That dude right there, he can't see the field for my team again. I'm not saying that as a Georgia fan. If anybody on Georgia's defense acted the way that dude did at the end of that football game, I wouldn't want him on the field again. Just being honest. Don't care if you're the captain. Don't care if you're the best player on the defense. Malachi Starks acts like that. Love Malachi Starks to death. Wouldn't want him on the field anymore because that was atrocious. That's all there is to it. But I'm not going to give any of this credit to Alabama. This is full-on credit to Vandy for doing what Georgia couldn't do it. I'm saying right now, glad Vandy's not on the schedule. Vandy would probably take us down too. So I'm glad we're not playing Vandy this year. But credit out to them. I mean, what a football game. Hope that they can continue this through the rest of the season. But what a wild week of football. Again, we got the one-ranked matchup in Missouri and Texas A&M, where Texas A&M, by the way, I didn't even talk about this one. Texas A&M absolutely thumped Missouri 41-10. 41-10. That's a number 25 Texas A&M versus a number 9 Missouri. Missouri has no offense this season. And by the way, clearly no defense when you're giving A&M 41 points either. 41-10 was that final. Missouri, not a top 10 team like we thought that they might have been earlier in the season. Crazy to think, too. You go back just a couple of weeks ago, hey, Vandy had this team on the ropes. They took them to overtime. Vandy probably should have won that football game, too. And we'd be looking at a whole different kind of a subject. You could be looking at the top 25 ranked Vandy had they taken down number 6 at the time, Missouri, and then taken down number 1, Alabama. Wow. What a time to be alive. Let's go, Vandy. I gotta give them the credit in this one because, again, just awesome. Awesome to see. But those were some of the bigger games. Obviously, SMU upsets number 22, Louisville. Don't know if you'd really call it an upset. SMU's a good football team, 34-27. Clemson over Florida State, 29-13. Not as pretty as you'd want it to be, but it was a win. Arizona State beating Kansas 35-31. Navy over Air Force 34-7. Again, Army-Navy is kind of wild to see them just completely undefeated in this one. Holy cow, Tulane over UAB 71-20. Definitely saw that one coming. Georgia Tech over Duke 24-14. Said that as country as I could. Indiana over Northwestern 41-24. See if I see any of the big ones. Iowa State over Baylor 43-21. Rutgers losing to Nebraska 14-7. Ohio State does beat Iowa 35-7. Again, credit out to Ohio State in this one. Iowa generally always has a good defense, but they just continue to pound on them. Ole Miss getting revenge this week over South Carolina 27-3. This is one where you kind of look and you go, okay, South Carolina thumps Kentucky. Kentucky turns around and beats Ole Miss, and then Ole Miss turns around and thumps South Carolina. It just doesn't make sense. That's why I say a lot of times you can't take these games and try to pin them against each other and think that they're the same team because it just doesn't work that way. Florida does get the win over UCF 24-13. Vanderbilt beat Alabama 40-35. Let's see. The Crimson Tide falls to the Commodores 40-35. Let's see. What else we got? Pitt over North Carolina 34-24. Let's see. Alabama 35, Vanderbilt 40. Wow, what an upset there. That's a good one. And then last but not least, we got Vandy over Alabama 42-35, rounding out our Week 6 games around the league. Hey, what a week of college football. Never would have thought it'd be this way. We've got some fun ones that are going to be coming up next week as well that we'll be looking forward to. I think game day. Where's game day? Isn't it like the Red River Rivalry this week? You do get South Carolina, Alabama. That'll be a fun one to kind of keep an eye on just in case. Florida, Tennessee, Ohio State, Oregon. Probably going to be the big one, number 2 and number 3. Technically, yeah, number 2 and number 3, they're going to be playing this week. So that'll be a big one. Cal at Pitt. Can't look away from that one. Minnesota, UCLA. UCLA is not a very good football team. Stanford, Notre Dame. Meh. Penn State, USC. That'll be a good one. Again, Texas and Oklahoma matching up. We know what that game was 2 years ago, and we know what it was last year. Kind of a flip of the script there, so something to look at there. Arizona, BYU. Obviously, we've got Georgia and Mississippi State. Mississippi State coming to Georgia, so that'll be some fun stuff to kind of talk about once we get to it. But I'm going to kind of round things out right there, and I will come back and check with you guys later on in the week where we get ready to preview that Mississippi State game. Check in with you guys then. Good on.